The following is a paid program, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent the opinions of the management of this station or Pamel Broadcasting. And the views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, and callers of this program are solely their own. They do not represent or reflect the views, policies, or official position of ACA, its affiliates, or its staff. ACA does not endorse any statements made during this broadcast. This is 1 in 31 Autism Today, a presentation from Anderson Center for Autism. 1 in 31 Autism Today is a weekly show devoted to autism spectrum disorder.
Good morning and welcome to 1 in 31 Autism Today, the podcast on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, Chief Development Officer at Anderson Center for Autism. And on behalf of the center and on behalf of Anderson Foundation for Autism, we are hosting 1 in 31 Autism Today. And this morning, I am pleased to have as my guest, Lauren Allen, with a lot of credentials after your name. I'll let you get into that. Lauren, you're an assistant professor and assistant program coordinator of applied behavior analysis with SUNY Empire State University. And I know you're involved in many things in many places. So let's start there and we'll get further along. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm an assistant professor in our Master's of Science and Applied Behavior Analysis program, as well as the program coordinator. And then my other hat that I'm really just thrilled to be able to wear is the assistant director of our Center for Autism Advocacy, Research, Education, and Supports. And my background is I'm a licensed psychologist. I'm a licensed behavior analyst, a board certified behavior analyst, and a nationally certified school psychologist.
So you just did it all. So that's a lot, and it's great because I mean I've gotten to know you a little bit over the years that since we've known each other, met each other. I know you're very involved in the Partners in Behavior Analysis conference that SUNY Empire, the CARES program there does in collaboration with Anderson Center, and we just finished the fourth one?
The fifth. We did the fifth
one. Oh my God! Okay,
I know.
Time has gotten away from me. So the fifth one, and I heard it was really successful, which is great. So congratulations on that. I know my end game with this conversation is to kind of hear your philosophy, your professional perspective on the field that you're in. But before we get into that, can you just give us a little more of your specific background? Like where did you start, or what was the first spark that led you in this path of applied behavior analysis and psychology, and then working in the university sector? How did that all start?
I think I was drawn to education from childhood. My mom was going to school to be a teacher when I was a child, when I was in elementary school. And so I got to go to some classes with her, and I thought that was pretty awesome. They let me tag along. And so I knew I was really kind of interested in education. I see that as just being such a core part of childhood and adolescence, but I didn't know kind of in what capacity. And then that really kind of evolved over time. I think I had a lot of involvement in high school with our special education inclusion classes and supporting, students in those rooms. And I really kind of loved that. And then moving into college, I was going to school for psychology and had the really kind of wonderful opportunity to support a professor's work in schools in a very rural community. And
interesting.
We were in southern Mississippi, in a very rural school district. And I had the opportunity there to support a lot of our behavioral consultation, the special education classrooms, all those sorts of things, and really kind of fell in love with it. And then went on to pursue my doctorate in school psychology as a result of that. And through that, really had the opportunity to be exposed to introduced to applied behavior analysis, and then really complete coursework. And then after graduating with my degree, actually as part of graduating with my degree, I had to move all the way up to Baltimore, Maryland. I did my pre-doctoral internship, so kind of the final step in getting my doctorate. I did at the Kennedy Krieger Institute,
very well known.
Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, in the behavioral psychology department, and had a really wonderful time learning everything that I possibly could under some fabulous mentors, and worked with clients and families largely kind of in an outpatient hospital context there, as well as doing some home-based work as well. And then did a postdoctoral internship. And then in doing that was introduced to the Ivy Mount School, which is a non-public special education school in Maryland. I eventually moved on to be program director of one of the school-based programs there. And loved that opportunity. I think that was kind of my first opportunity of seeing a school that was really designed with neurodivergent people at front front of mind. And so I always used to kind of tell, students and families when they joined our school from coming from other places, like, this is going to be your kind of big exhale moment. You are going to get to be you all day, every day. And you're going to be safe, and you're going to have, so many friends, and you're going to be on SGA if you want, and you're going to go to prom if you want, and all those sorts of things. And it was like this really transformative moment of just me understanding what a huge role belonging and that sense of community kind of play for people, and seeing kind of the power of that, as well as, kind of really taking all my love for kind of instructional approaches and behavioral approaches. And again, doing it in a way that really centers the student, their strengths, kind of what they want, considers and brings in, families for their input and support in the process, and really kind of just designs this whole educational environment that ensures, the student, the learner is going to be successful and going to be happy and healthy and all those good things, which I thought was really powerful. And then after leaving Maryland, we had the fortune to move up to Saratoga Springs, New York, which is where I am now. And then I was able to join Empire State University with my colleague, my trusted colleague, and I know a close friend of Anderson Center for Autism and Anderson Center International, Dr. Noor Sayed, and we were able to launch the ABA program, and I was able to join in on what she had just launched in CARES. And I think the biggest things that continue to kind of always be central is this like ongoing pursuit of learning. So if my goal is to support, autistic and neurodivergent people in whatever phase of life they're in, I need to always ensure that I am listening and continually learning and trying to understand their perspective, their community's perspective, what they individually want and value and want to do, what they don't want to do, all those good things. But really kind of like ensuring that lived experience is central. And that pursuit of understanding is really never ending. I never want to assume that I know more about somebody's life than they do, for example. So I think that's a perspective that I really am committed to professionally, and in the education and training that I do, whether for future behavior analysts in the program or just more broadly with community-based trainings, is really trying to kind of always prioritize, the individuals, the neurodivergent or disabled individuals, their dignity, their priorities, their autonomy, right? Like I want them to have the agency within their life to pursue their goals and those sorts of things. And I think we really champion doing that by trying to undertake systems changes and education that's really going to promote that, inclusion, those universal design approaches that, really seek to consider the preferences, the needs, the strengths, the challenges of really any individual that's going to come into context with that situation, right? So, for example, in higher ed, in my classes, I want to think about, okay, what's everybody bringing with them from their own lives and their own identities and their intersectional identities to my class? What's going to help them be successful there? What are the barriers that I didn't design, but I need to be a detective and try to figure out so that I can proactively try to remove them, right? And I think that's what I try to advocate for, and I know really aligns with CARES and Empire State and Anderson Center for Autism, right? Like trying to advocate for these universally designed environments, right? Whether that is in classrooms, whether that's in communities, in job sites, we want every space to include the folks who want to be there and allow them to be maximally engaged and successful, and while also being their authentic selves. And I think that's how we kind of get to this place of greater belonging and greater equity for neurodivergent people and people with disabilities.
Great. That's also a lot. I'm curious, there's so many places I want to go with what you're saying, but I'm going to go backwards a little bit. Yeah. One of the things you mentioned at a certain point, you were doing some work in a very rural part of, I think you said Mississippi, right? Yeah. Now, I just know because of, this is anecdotal, but it's through inquiries that we get at Anderson from all over the country in terms of, school age programs and consulting and things like that, that there seem to be pockets of areas geographically that have more or less resources for individuals, neurodivergent individuals, autistic individuals and their families. And so I'm wondering, especially also because you said it was a rural area, and then over a series of obviously years and different experiences, all of a sudden you're at Ivy Mount, which is a very very targeted, very specific program. And then you're in an area like Saratoga Springs, New York, which comes with it quite a lot of resources, probably compared to some of the other places. So like what, I don't know. Can you describe at all the different feelings? I would think that you gained a lot from all of those different experiences. But is there something that stands out in terms of like, this was when I literally remember just soaking in so much or being so inspired that this is what I want to do? Because I could see it playing out either in the place where you have access to so many resources or the place where maybe you were one of such a few number of people who were working with this population. So did you have any of that experience?
That's a great question. I agree wholeheartedly that seeing a lot of different contexts and situations, and certainly differences in resources is it very helpful, because I think you need to be able to work with the resources that you have, advocating always for more, and advocating for what people and groups need. I will say, to your question, one just kind of standout moment to me was we were starting kind of a new day program in the school district, and I had the pleasure of just working with a teacher and a counselor who were going to be working in the classroom, and we really kind of launched it from the ground up. And their dedication and willingness to really like think outside the box and do things in ways that we haven't historically done, but like what's going to work best for our students, and being able, they called it the Success Lab, and it was a really fitting
great name.
It was a really fitting name, and they were so committed to making sure that was a warm, safe environment, and an environment where their students were going to learn and be happy and have that sense of community. I can see almost all those students' faces as I think about it, but I think that was just a testament to like when you innovate with information in mind that really kind of pursues that understanding of people's experiences and what's going to work here, even if we've never done it before in this certain school district, for example, we're going to have those really impactful outcomes. We're going to have students who know they're loved when they show up for school every day, even when they're having a tough day in terms of, maybe having some behaviors that are getting in the way of their learning a little bit. We're going to prioritize their well-being and making sure they're good and they're taken care of. Even if, maybe, they don't all go back to the same homes with the same level of resources as all the students in the class. So always thinking kind of about those basic needs and that safety and that, love, and that really prioritizing environments that are going to help people thrive. That was such a standout, I think, moment for me, probably in my career.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. I think, innovation, even within a field that has a lot of structure inherently built into it, but being able to innovate and then recognizing when you have colleagues who are kind of right there with you, that's such an empowering feeling. And I would venture to guess is usually where you're going to see the biggest impact, long-term impact, because at the end of the day, we're all working with people, and people are, individuals, and they respond to different things. So as long as we have that flexibility, it's really incredible what can be done. We're going to take a quick break at that point, and then we're going to come back and talk sort of even more globally about the field as a whole and how you see it evolving and maybe what might be coming in the future. This is 1 in 31 Autism Today. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, and we'll be right back.
Stand Up to Cancer asked leading cancer researchers to speak about why they do their work.
Two words come to mind for me. One is responsibility. The other is purpose.
It's just so inspiring to do research that impacts human lives.
Stand Up to Cancer has been a critical partner in advancing research for cancer.
Cancer research saves lives.
So please help us fight in this battle against cancer.
Be a part of the team that ends cancer at standuptocancer.org.
What are you doing out there?
Come on!
I saw you at the game the other night. Yeah, you. Up there getting mad, acting like we're all out there making $1 million a game. Well, let me be real with you. This isn't the pros. It's school sports, and it's a game, our game. So please, let us play.
School sports fans, remember, when you cheer for your team, make noise for the right reasons. This message presented by the NFHS and the NIAAA.
And all student athletes in New York.
And now, 1 in 31 Autism Today continues on 100.7 WHUD. This is a weekly community affairs presentation from the Anderson Center for Autism.
Welcome back to 1 in 31 Autism Today, the podcast on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, and I'm talking today with Dr. Lauren Allen from SUNY Empire CARES program, Center for Autism Advocacy, Research, Education, and Supports, and just a wealth of information, certainly a thought leader in the field of applied behavior analysis, but also just education and research and advocacy for neurodivergent and autistic individuals, learners of, it sounds like, many ages you've worked with over the years, and now you're up in Saratoga Springs, working with the university. I love listening to you talk. You have so much experience and background, and yet you kind of put out just your personality. Is all I can think about is what's next. Like, what do you think about for the future? Because it certainly seems as though you've got a lot ahead of you in terms of things you want to do. You've got a lot of energy, and that's great. We need that in the field. Obviously, this podcast is named in part for the current statistic of diagnosed young folks, kids on the spectrum in the United States. Those statistics, I've had people on before, guests who can really speak to how those studies are done. This is particularly the CDC study, but there's many. And I'll just take a moment to remind people, if you didn't listen to the last interview on that topic, the message really came clear that if you're interested in statistics of people, on the spectrum in this country and in the world, read as many studies as you can, because they all come at it from a different perspective and a different lens. And so the numbers, you can learn a lot about what all these studies are looking at and how they might be able to, play together, as opposed to just being one is the right one. So that being said, you're in a very, large part of the field, and you've been all over the country. I'm curious, you talked before about kind of your philosophy when you're in the classroom with your students, your approach to belonging and inclusivity, and I think that's really important. When you think even more broadly than that, though, and you think about the workforce, preschools all the way up to adulthood, aging, nursing facilities, the medical field. We're talking about human beings who experience life, all aspects of life, just like anyone else, although in their own unique way. So, dating, romantic relationships, just so many things going on in the world. What is your philosophy about that? How do you think about people who are neurodivergent living and navigating in the world today? And maybe if you could tie some connections to ABA specifically, just answer that however you see fit, because it's a big question, but I'm just curious your thoughts.
It's a great question. Certainly, I think, behavior analysis and behavior analysts are really well positioned to make the kind of changes that I think are really important, right? We value, right, making changes in the environment that's going to result in meaningful changes, right? And so I think that's a beautiful contrast to some of the more traditional ways that society aims to support neurodivergent people with disabilities in the workplace, in their communities. And that tends to be kind of that accommodation only focus. And accommodations are fabulous, right? But there's limitations, right? And so accommodations really in the workforce, in schools, in the community really rely on that individual. So that individual with a disability saying, hey, I have this need that differs from other people's. And so I'm asking for this, extra thing, right? This support, this tool. And so they not only have to kind of go out of their way to make that request, they have to disclose this really personal information about themselves to somebody else, some organization. Mm-hmm. They may have done that in the past and been not welcomed, and how, they may have encountered stigma and bias, right? They've probably seen their friends and their communities experience stigma and bias as a result of sharing more about themselves. And so that's a model that we have, and it's better than nothing, right? But it's just not enough. And so instead, again, coming from that behavior analysis lens, how can we really rethink environments, advocate for systems level changes, and in a way that, again, considers not only the needs and wants of the majority, right? The neuro majority, folks who don't identify as being neurodivergent or having a disability, right? but how can we really welcome and value the experiences and the preferences and the wants and needs of everybody who's a part of our community and who makes our community so rich? And in doing that, we're then, again, that universal design approach, we're then taking that, instead of placing that burden on somebody else to like, hey, this environment wasn't designed with you in mind. I'm going to ask you to work extra hard to fit in here. Instead of that approach, we're kind of throwing that old way out and we're saying, actually, let's bring you in to the drawing board, right? Let's figure out what's going to work better for you. Let's consider what's going to work better for others, and let's do it in a better and different way at the big picture level, right? So at the organization level, at the community level, and that's going to reach a lot more folks. That's going to be more sustainable over time. That's also going to just really importantly send the message that your unique perspective, everybody's unique perspective and way of being is important and valued. And I think that's kind of a really important starting point.
I agree. It is a shift in model, just in thinking and conceptualizing and in designing environments, and honestly, it from everything as small as like literally daily decision making. How you're going to walk down the street, how you're going to offer to help somebody when you don't know all the things that are going on, but your gut tells you I should offer something. How are you going to set up your environment? How are you going to train staff if you have a business where you're employing other people? All the way up to huge things like, I know that there's discussion at the architecture level of the design, building design, transportation hubs. And I love what I'm starting to see and hear about, which is kind of what you're talking about, rather than saying, oh, well, let's design this and then let's make this one little section, specific for a group of people who've told us that they want, these things. And we can really only do one or two, but we'll do our best to designing for everyone. Because one of the things that ever since I started doing this podcast, which was years ago, a theme that emerged pretty quickly and has never left is once people are talking about things that tend to be beneficial to a neurodivergent group of individuals or people who have sensory, sensitivities and things like that, either need more sensory input or less sensory input, or just want the options to have more or less at any given time. All of a sudden, you start to very quickly be talking about the entire general public, which is I have sensory sensitivities, you have sensory sensitivities. And when you start approaching kind of all of those decisions with that in mind, that it's really about thinking about people and the human experience and the shared experience. These walls of we're designing for this group today and we're designing for that group tomorrow really start to fall down, which I think has been an important part of rebuilding in a new way. You have to break the old stuff down. Even something like ramps. I mean, that used to be very specific for people in wheelchairs. And I think as that has shifted the design elements of building access and home access and school access, you recognize that actually having ramps and the ability to just not have to do stairs is really beneficial for a huge number of people, regardless of the reason why, which also is another thing that I want to ask you. Are you starting to see any sort of shift around, away from, well, I want to know why, and that the why is becoming less important than just doing what is right? Is that, I don't know, it's just kind of a recent question that's popped into my head.
That's
making people justify the reason. Is that really important anymore or as much?
Oh, that's such a good question. It's interesting you say that, because I feel like I, especially in kind of talking to my colleagues at the college, in the college context, I say a lot, you don't need to know, people don't need to tell you maybe why they need something. Yes. You have to kind of trust that when they want something or they need something or they don't like something, that's their authentic experience, right? And just like I would want somebody to listen to me when I said that, everybody wants that same thing. So I don't know, but I agree with you. I think we need to broadly kind of, hear that collective, those collective community preferences where they exist and respond to those.
Well, I'm excited to be talking to you today. We have to finish up, but I think this has been a really excellent conversation. Hopefully it gets other people asking those questions or just sitting with them and thinking about how they might answer that. I also want to do a shout out to our younger generation up in, the people in elementary school and middle school right now, and recognizing that these are the folks who are growing up in a world where I think it is different. And I think the future is bright for a level of acceptance and inclusivity that is probably beyond what any of us in our general age range. I know you're younger than me, but I mean, may have grown up with. So I think the future really is bright with a lot of big questions to ponder and decisions to be made. So, Lauren Allen, it has been a pleasure talking to you. I'm really excited about the work that you've done and are doing and what's going to happen in the future. And we just, on behalf of Anderson Center, we definitely enjoy and really appreciate our relationship with you all at SUNY Empire and the CARES program.
Oh, same. Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely to talk with you and think about the world at this big picture level. So thank you.
Absolutely. This is 1 in 31 Autism Today, the podcast on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, and remember, Anderson cares.
You've been listening to 1 in 31 Autism Today, a weekly presentation from Anderson Center for Autism. Join them for another edition of the show next weekend.